Welcome to Vator Box. I'm Bambi Francisco. This week we take a look at Wetpaint, a site that lets anyone create their own wiki pages or wiki site. This week we have Charlene Lee as our guest host once again. Charlene is the founder of Altimeter Group, and as always we have Ezra Roizen, who's our who is the digital media investment banker and Vator Box regular. So Charlene, Ezra, thank you for joining us again.
Thanks for having us again.
Okay, let's take a look at Wetpaint and watch Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben Elowitz. I'm the CEO of Wetpaint. Wetpaint is the leading social publishing platform on the web. We have 1.3 million websites created by end users. We have over 100 brands, Fortune 500 brands, that are using Wetpaint to bring their audience into social publishing. Wetpaint's raised $40 million in venture funding. We're finding that the promise of bringing social publishing to the web is not only powerful for individual people who can get deeply involved in a cause that they care about and bring their friends and other people who share that interest into their site, but it's also been very powerful for brands and marketers who want to engage their audience and get far, far beyond where social networks let them go. With Wetpaint socially powered sites, you have people who are adding content to their site, who are getting sites to grow, and as they grow, they're ending up bringing more and more audience online each and every week. That audience is important because for brands especially, it leads right to the bottom line as they're getting more of their users online, more of their consumers engaged, and they're actively monetizing that audience far beyond what a social network has been able to do with the famous poor rates of monetization on social networks. Wetpaint sites are getting 10 and 20 times the click-through rates of social networks, and all that is translating directly into revenues and profits for media companies.
10 to 20 times click-through rates. The only thing I could say is I remember speaking to Ben a couple of years ago when they launched, and I guess he's probably happy that he didn't call the site WikiPaint, because back then it was all about we're a wiki service. This is about creating wikis, and now it's all about social publishing services. Just funny how things change, or the buzzwords change.
Again, I think the pitch could have used some specific examples. I always like to hear exactly what people are doing. You know, a brand like Eli Lilly did this, or whatever it is. There may be a specific case study, or someone could just quickly articulate what they did for somebody versus sort of generic stuff. Because you could have taken that same pitch and applied it to a number of other companies.
Yeah, I think you packed in a lot in a minute.
I think it was a pretty good pitch,
yeah.
and I should disclose that I am a user and subscriber, and I pay. They make money off of me, $15 every month, because I host my wiki on there. But I've seen, again, Wetpaint for as long as they've been around, and again, from the beginning, they didn't want it to be just a wiki, which I thought was a really smart idea. That this was really about letting your users, your fan base, whatever people you wanted to come in, or just individuals, be able to very quickly and easily publish content up there. So I still think of them as a wiki in many ways. I call it a wiki, but it's much more than that, and it's so easy to use. And just the pitch, I thought, really captured, I think, since I know the company quite well, really captured a lot what they did.
So what about the novelty? I mean, the fact that they started in '05 and realized or had the foresight that people are going to want to have their own little communities, or people are going to want to be able to collaborate together. I think that was pretty sort of prescient on their, from their perspective, on their end. But now they seem to be competing with a lot of other companies.
There's a lot of wiki companies out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of companies out there. PBWiki, and Google has offerings that are not dissimilar. So I think there are and plus all kinds of other ways of publishing blog software and others. And the question becomes not just the method of publishing, so wiki being one method, or I was playing around. I saw their site and I went and looked at Pluck, and Pluck was doing a lot of corporate stuff. They had a really interesting site that had Whole Foods recipes where people could leave comments and interact and so on. And I think that how corporations will want to engage their audience is a whole other issue, because if people are editing content and creating content around a corporate brand area, that's not something you necessarily want them doing. So you have to find a way of being a custodian of that environment that doesn't necessarily have people saying this product stinks and I hate everybody that uses it. So you have to create an environment that either has plausible deniability, where it's sort of one removed from the brand, or where it's somewhat stewarded by the brand itself. So it's not a totally easy problem to solve for many brands.
Is that, Charlene, I mean, you're an expert in this area, how corporations are incorporating these social media?
They're putting it right off, they're hanging Wetpaint, for the brands that are working with it are hanging right off of the homepage. And so one of my favorite examples is Discovery Channel. They've had it for the longest time. One of my favorite examples is Deadliest Catch. And you can go on there, you can go right into the community area, and it goes right here. It's not the wiki pages, it's the community area. This is where it lives, is on the Wetpaint site. And you go in there, you can get episode updates, background tips, viewing parties. I mean, it's very well populated, and again, a very, very enthusiastic fan base. And what's interesting is, again, Discovery is really pushing people to those pages on their broadcast. Okay, come onto our Wetpaint page, come onto our wikis, come to our community pages, and interact with each other, interact with other fans.
So how do you think, why, I mean, Ben's been, you know, he took Blue Nile public, he's a seasoned executive, so he knows how to talk to these big media companies, but in our last Vator Box segment, you were talking about how brands really want to have control of their audience, but here it seems like they're really working with Wetpaint. So they seem to be doing a good job being able to work with big media companies.
Yeah, and what they've done is, like, look, you know, you go and you own that community, so you can actually decide what content goes on there. I always think about the best community sites and publishing sites are ones that have gardeners, people who can make the really good content grow and encourage it to grow, but also can pull out the weeds. So it's not so much about censoring negative comments, so to speak. Negative comments are fine. It's really getting out the trolls, getting out the ancillary information, also organizing it in a very usable way. So you apply good user interface, really good encouragement of content to be created by people, and you can make it very, very accessible.
What do you think?
I think that's a great point. I think it is about getting rid of the trolls, getting rid of the spammers, making sure there isn't. And then also just organizing it. So if people are a fan of a site, and you know, there's going to be a small number of contributors and a lot of consumers. These guys are leveraging passionate contributors who love the site or product or Battlestar Galactica or U.S. Army or whatever the other things we flashed up on the screen. So I think that's our discovery. And then if you can also provide a little bit of oversight to sort of make sure it's organized, it should be a great resource for folks who stumble upon it and want to enjoy the content.
Well, if you're, say, a brand, because they're working with, I guess, HBO and Showtime, and if you're a brand and you want to create a fan base around your shows, would you work with a company like Buddy Media, or would you work with a company like Wetpaint?
Very different offerings. Again, Buddy Media is more about apps on social networking sites, so going out to them, whereas this is a destination on your site. And they should absolutely do both. They should be doing lots of different things. It's always, again, a mix of engagement tools and points for your audience.
They raised $40 million. What do you think they have to do to return that back to investors?
That's a huge amount of money. I think, you know, again, back to sort of I was playing out with Pluck. I think Pluck was bought for 70 or something like that, 60 to 80 by Demand Media.
Yeah.
So that's, and that was a pretty successful company that had, you know, pretty strong revenue streams from my understanding. So I think there's a big hurdle here, and you got to have a pretty strong curve to be able to return $40 million. So I think it's a great company and lots of interesting stuff. From an investor return standpoint, how do you get over that hurdle? And maybe there's some tricks they have that they can scale rapidly from a revenue standpoint, but that's a pretty high hurdle.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that the thing, though, again, just knowing Ben, having met him, seen his work, you know, he's very sophisticated. He's built a very good team. It is a tough time out there right now because, again, his core group of of people who are paying him, media companies, don't have a lot of money either. And so they're not necessarily spending more money. If anything, they're trying to clamp down how much money they have. So I imagine it's tough getting those tough discussions. So that $40 million may have to sit for a while.
He's going to have to be patient.
Yeah, but if there's a way to create a lot of long-tail content and mid-tail content and be able to figure out creative ways to integrate monetization inside of all of this sort of freely developed content, then you can get an audience and you can begin to now, you know, convert them into money. So,
well, they have an audience they've brought. They have 1.3 million of these sites, which are filled with.
I mean, a lot of them probably aren't that great. But
two
some
members.
Of them are great. Yeah.
You know, really small. So you have a lot of disparate.
But the reality is, having 2 members doesn't mean there's only 2 viewers. It just means there's 2 folks who are contributing.
Contributing and editing. True.
Okay.
So. They do 8 million, I believe, in unique visitors. That's what they said. So, okay, well, I think we've given Ben and Devin, he's the marketing manager there, enough feedback, advice. Hopefully they appreciate it. Charlene, thanks very much for joining us again, and we'll have you back next week with a different outfit. And Ezra Roizen, as always, thanks for joining us. So Ben and Devin, if you're out there watching, please give us feedback. We're not experts here. Well, maybe Charlene is. You've been watching Vator Box. I'm Bambi Francisco. We'll see you next time on Vator News.